On. Call to order. Thank you for being here and your patience, specifically from the last meeting. Roll call. My name is Alderwoman Ellie Tierney, Ward 1, and to my left.
Mark Rodriguez, Ward 5.
And to my right.
Rhonda Pendell Charles, Ward 3.
Okay. Could I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Could I have a motion to approve minutes
So moved.
Second.
from July 11? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So this leads us to appointments, and I see that Tom is here, but so we're going to very quickly go to the two that aren't here, and then Tom, you'll be third very quickly. We have an appointment of a reappointment. Keyword is reappointment of she goes by Beth, but Beth Dalzell to the Transportation Board. She's a constituent of mine. Her husband is chair of the Ethics Commission. She totally has my support. I don't know if you guys had time to look, or you even know her. So could I have a motion to approve the reappointment of Elizabeth Dalzell to the Transportation Board?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and I'll sign that for Hillary. And the other one, Kara.
Hillary, do you have something to say about?
Oh,
No, not unless you need me to.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
okay. Now, Kara, I might need Hillary to say something. I don't know Kara. Her resume is very suitable. But this, let me formally say, this is for the appointment of Kara Plewinski to the Transportation Board. She was here last month, so she has, and she has a lot of enthusiasm. I did speak with her, and we were excited about sort of the new things that we can talk about as far as other than parking. So she, I really support her enthusiasm, and if you want to speak more of
Sure.
your meeting with her.
Hillary Raftovich, Office of the Mayor. Ms. Plewinski wanted to serve, she's a resident of Ward 7 and would like to serve on this board. Her experience is in marketing, but she did marketing with the Department of Transportation. So by way of that, she has transportation knowledge. And as we enter this next phase of parking issues in downtown Annapolis and trying to encourage the public to use new methodology and the circulator and things like that, I think somebody with a marketing background could be really valuable to this team.
I totally agree.
Absolutely.
So can I entertain a motion to recommend, let me get her formal name here, Kara Plewinski to the Transportation Board?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So third, try not to be too partial here. This is Thomas was also here last meeting. Thomas Rikas is a constituent of mine who was my right-hand person, right-hand man in the very difficult residential parking ordinance that was very important to do in the interest of the city and the residential parking districts, the way they were codified to be used. And Tom's background in government, CIA specifically, with numbers, is
You weren't supposed to say
FBI. I know. He's retired now. I just can't say enough about him. And tonight, pending his approval, he does have some words for us on that whole process. So would we like to make a motion first, or You don't want us to judge you after your speech, do you?
Thank you.
Okay. So why don't I do that so that he is free to speak as a transportation board? Oh, okay. So as a what's the word? Transportation board elect. Okay, so why don't you go ahead then, Tom?
Good evening, Alderwoman Tierney, Alderwoman Pindell Charles, Alderman Rodriguez. I appreciate Mayor Buckley's nominating me to serve as an at-large member of the Transportation Board. As I wrote in my statement for appointment,
Mr. Rakers, please turn on your mic.
Even though we heard you.
Thank you.
while the focus of the committee may be traffic, transit, and parking issues, the real need on this board is appointees with critical thinking skills. My professional background and expertise lends itself well to the tasks of this committee: to provide informed analysis of facts, to provide oversight, guidance, and expertise in planning of comprehensive policies. Through my past testimonies before the City Council, you may be acquainted with some examples of my work on various legislative matters, most notably 04-19. If I may, I would like to take a few moments of your time to present an example of the type of analysis and reporting to the mayor and city council that I hope that I do as an at-large member of the Transportation Board. So in that regard, I'd like to do an update on the residential parking program as amended by 04-19. In all of my advocacy for 04-19, my position has been that this legislation is about residential parking. My testimony before the Annapolis City Council on April 29th, 2019, summed up my position as part of the public record. Let me reiterate, my focus is the residential parking program, how it is administered and enforced by the city and its agents. My advocacy, outreach, public testimony, and engagement with the city and interested parties in all manners regarding the residential parking program has been and will continue to be based on fact supported by quantifiable data and observation. In mid-April 2019, as part of the collaborative effort between and among residents and the city to amend residential parking program in Title 12 of the Municipal Code, as was done by 04-19, I requested fiscal year 2019 residential parking data pursuant to a Maryland Public Information Act. In response, the city provided a list of all Annapolis parking residential permit account holders, to include each account holder's full name, each account holder's full address, the City of Annapolis parking permit number, that is the number printed on the decal, that was issued to each account holder. I also received the permit number of all temporary permits issued online to each account holder, along with the effective and expiration dates of each temporary permit issued. I also received the aggregate number of monthly temporary permits issued to each account holder. These are the ones that are physically obtained when an individual goes to the SP Plus Service Center. So while I did not receive this information until the first week of June, which was several weeks after the legislation was passed, when I initially looked at it, this data confirmed a predicate behind 04-19 of the long-established basic principle stated in the city code that residential streets are primarily for parking by residents. Moreover, the data validated an initial finding that persons who were not eligible for parking privileges were receiving them, and it proved the need to strengthen the processes to ensure that those who apply for residential parking permits were, in fact, residents. So 04-19 became effective on July 1st, 2019. Within days, there was social media commentary among a certain group self-identified as short and long-term rental hosts of Annapolis regarding the changes brought about by 0419. On July 22, 2019, when I testified before the City Council in support of R3319, I stated I was still in the process of analyzing all of the data. However, I was able to give an example where between July 1st, 2018 and April 12th, 2019, a rental host on 45 online occasions obtained multi-day temporary residential parking permits for weekend parking of 2 vehicles, representing 177 days of long-term on-street parking at $3.50 per day. The revenue to the city for these transactions totaled $619.50. Now, today, this person is not entitled to residential parking privileges, and the property's listing on vacation rental by owner lays out the variety of parking options at area garages and directs users to the Annapolis Parking website for further details. So let's presume that for the same period this year, that rental host requires the same 177 days of long-term parking for their guests, and those guests choose the option to park at the closest garage, which is Hillman, 1 block from the property, at $20 per day. The revenue to the city for the same 177 days would increase by $1,920.50 to $2,540. So over the past several months, I've conducted further analysis on this data to gauge the fiscal 2020 impact on the city's budget. So I've presented a table that presents a snapshot of online and in-person fiscal year 2019 purchases by Annapolis Parking residential parking permit account holders in residential parking districts 1 and 2. There's a footnote to that. I specifically chose these 2 districts because those are the ones that have been studied as being oversaturated. So generally speaking, in both districts, a relatively small group of rental hosts purchased the majority of residential parking permits in those districts. In one case, a rental host in Residential Parking District 2 went online 222 times to download 711 days of on-street temporary residential parking permit. The same rental host obtained another 40 temporary residential parking permits in person. Though the city received $2,628.50 in revenue from the 756 days of $3.50 per day temporary residential parking permits, hypothetically, since these visitors were not directed to the closest city-owned garage for long-term off-street parking at $20 per day, the potential loss to the city from this activity amounts to $11,731.50. The grand total potential economic loss of almost $65,000 cannot be ignored. However, that's a number that's developed in hindsight. It is also a number that presumes that every on-street temporary residential parking permit purchased by a rental host was given to a rental guest. While I cannot say with absolute certainty that was the case, I have a high degree of confidence in the numbers presented here. With that said, as in the R3319 example, if all things remain equal, that same $65,000 would be increased revenue to the parking fund during fiscal year 2020. This is a direct result of a holistic strategy to move long-term visitors from on-street parking to other options, in part enabled by tweaks to the residential parking program accomplished by 0419. Lastly, the actual fiscal impact of 0419 won't be known until the fiscal year 2020 parking fund numbers are generated for the fiscal year 2021 budget cycle. I would expect to see a decrease in revenue from temporary residential parking permits, offset by an increase in the fees collected at the city-owned garages. At the very least, the numbers in the table give us some baseline. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
I just want to make a few comments for clarification. When I initiated this legislation with Tom's assistance, I'm not sure what word I want to use, the users was not addressed or cared about. I just want to make that clear that this legislation was generated because we had a saturation problem in the residential parking districts, a saturation. There was some talk about, well, why don't you just raise the temporary parking permit fee? We doubted that would resolve the saturation problem. Subsequent to, as Tom summarizes here, subsequent to this legislation getting approved and initiated, or even before then, Tom mentions this, you witnessed a lot of pushback from that it was very obvious, sort of incriminating themselves that it was this short-term rental issue. But I just want to preface that by saying, I want to go on record by saying that this legislation was not targeted to that use. It was to reinforce our code. And that leads me to my question. Tom, was this, using the code before it was changed, was this a failure of our parking management company to identify them as residents as the code stood for at that time? Do you understand my question?
Alderwoman Tierney, the prior code in the language spoke to establishing both residency and to establish residency, there was ownership and occupancy, I think was the phrase. And there was language in the prior code that said occupancy could be established by the absence of a rental license. Yeah. That part of the code and other language in that particular section created great ambiguity.
Right.
So when individuals were establishing their bona fides as residents, that ambiguity allowed for a wide latitude in adjudication, where individuals who truly were not eligible under a strict view of the code would not have received permits to begin with. So I believe that, in our effort on 0419, it was to take out that ambiguity.
Yeah.
To to have discrete eligibility criteria, well-defined eligibility criteria, so that the parking contractor in their adjudication had some pretty good bright line rules to follow without having to really think, well, is
any
this
judgment.
or isn't it?
Yes.
And that credit goes to the city council for having enacted that legislation, tweaking the code as you did.
So problem identified, problem solved with the legislation on the code revision. Lastly, I only have one, there is a variable. I know your assumption was that those, well, let me just step back just so you see the big picture. $350 a day to park in prime real estate was a deal. But I just want to put that in perspective. But your assumption that they would all now park at Hillman is not quite true because of the Calvert garage availability, that being free and on weekends. So that, there's a variable there that it's not everyone that had a temporary permit would now park for $20 a day. I actually don't know where they're parking. I don't know, but so
Absolutely,
we'll know.
Alderwoman Tierney.
Yeah.
The true success story here, though, is that in doing their outreach and advocacy, individuals are now presenting to their guests the various parking options beyond the on-street parking.
Right. Yeah.
So if we look at it again in a holistic way, factoring in our desire in reimagining City Dock, for example, and the impact on parking, what we're seeing is, at least in this small review, that there's more of a direction to shunt these vehicles from on-street to the other options. Now, in this particular case, the closest parking option was Hillman. Mm-hmm. And if I were to look at a distribution on the maps, but again, the success story is long-term off-street parking being directed to those other options.
Right.
And even if it's only a fraction,
right,
half of this is still $32,000. So any increase, I think, is in the positive direction.
Right. SP Plus has a good website and a good outreach on other parking opportunities, outside of the residential parking districts. And we went through all of the numbers during that legislation as far as, how many available spaces, how many residents, and all of that. So we will, as Tom said, we will know when SP Plus does a great job of collecting data, and we actually will know if there has been remote garage increase use based on these previous temporary parking permit users going elsewhere. It could be Gott's Garage, it could be Knighton, it could, ironically, I would love that anyone bringing visitors to downtown would say, don't bring your car. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, use rideshare. That doesn't help our revenue, but revenues isn't really, always the driver here. We just got to get away from this. Right, Kurt? Alternative means of transportation. So does anyone have any questions thank you for this.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Just say thank you, and thank you, Alderman Tierney and Mr. Rickes for your advocacy and analysis and education on 0419. That's exactly why it passed. But I have to say, I particularly appreciate, as a law student with 1 month left in his law school career, I appreciate the citations.
It's been said that the real story is in the footnotes.
I know.
Thank you, Mr. Rickes. Appreciate it. All the work you've done, certainly appreciate it.
And I will share this with my other colleagues. So on that, do we have a motion to recommend Thomas Rickes to the Transportation Board?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Tom. All right, so that's it with our recommendations, and okay. We have legislation, 2 pieces. The first piece of legislation is the adequate facilities, auto transportation facilities. I, read everything and was prepared to comment, but then I saw that there was no planning commission, no rules and regs, and I learned that it's going to be postponed Monday night, so I suggest that we postpone it as well, as it has to be subject to some amendments, because I asked the city manager if some of her questions were addressed, and she said no, and so I assume there's going to be some subsequent amendments. So do I have a motion to postpone?
I have.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I just want to make the comments I made before the Public Safety as well as the Rules Committee regarding this legislation. As many of you know, we have the Eastport Forest Drive Citizens and Governmental Entities Task Force that we recently created, and part of that will be looking at the Forest Drive corridor, especially at least from my ward in Ward 3, the intersection of Chickwapin, Forest Drive, and Aristide Allen. Chickwapin is a city roadway, Forest Drive is a county roadway, and Aristide Allen is a state roadway. So during this time, since we've been meeting, coalition of resident leadership from Ward 8, Eastport Civic Association, as well as Ward 3, Greater Parole Community Association, we have talked about this, and we have had an opportunity, which is unprecedented, to develop an MOU between all three governmental agencies. We have 21, possibly 22 people that will be sitting on this task force. Every ward has at least one person. The ones that are more impacted have more. We have one from the county in the lower Bay Ridge Hillsmere area. We also have two from each, two from city, two from county, and two from state, who will be serving on this task force. First meeting is Tuesday, December the 3rd at the Pitt Memorial Center. So in light of all that, I was very hesitant on proceeding with this piece of legislation, especially through public safety, for which I'm the chair, because I didn't want anything to thwart things that the task force may come up with. So that was the reason for me, at least with public safety, requesting a postponement on this legislation, because we want to make sure that nothing passed in here will affect what the task force may come up with and what they may decide to do when it comes to the corridor Forest Drive. So in a nutshell, that's my submission, and that's my support for postponement of this legislation.
Anything to add?
I support the postponement.
Yeah, I also want to say, I think that's great that we took the helicopter view on this, because my hunch on this was that something triggered it, and I wasn't clear on what was broken. And so because of the task force, we'll be able to have more of a macro view of all these moving parts, and specifically the main artery, which is, as my colleague said, is multi-jurisdictional. I'll accept a motion to postpone.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So, okay, and last but not least is modern technology. This is 036-19, and this is the purpose of including parking kiosks and parking mobile devices in the requirements for installation, location of parking meters. Rick Gordon, would you introduce yourself? And
yes, Rick Gordon, Department of Transportation.
Good
Before
evening,
I talk
Mr. Gordon.
about this, I'd like to take a minute and congratulate Mr. Rikas on his appointment to the Transportation Board. I, as well as Deputy Dewey, look forward to working with him. We know he's got a lot of good information. He's made that plain to you all, and I've been hearing about it for several months now. So we look forward to working with him in the future.
Great, absolutely.
Back to the legislation. This is simply a amendment to the current code to include, as you say, more modern technology. The city's now embarking on the use of multimedia kiosks as well as mobile technology for parking. And this simply changes the code to include those devices.
And the update on that is, you remember you approved them in the capital budget, 3, right? We were
Four.
buying 4.
Four,
Yeah, we
yes.
got 4. And they'll be installed, and they were Historic Preservation Commission.
That is correct.
Approved them, finish and all. So that will, they'll be installed soon at Market, and then those meters will replace some of the broken ones we have. So, do I have any questions?
No questions.
So could I entertain a motion to recommend O36-19 regarding parking meters?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Anything for the good of the order? No? Could I entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved. The second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Congratulations to the board. Woo!
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.